Pay rises of 2.87% to 4.65% for the city's civil servants. The government seeks court injunctions to restrain the broadcasting and dissemination of the protest song Glory to Hong Kong. And Kiev and Moscow blame each other for the breaching of a major dam in southern Ukraine. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. The Chief Executive in Council has proposed a pay rise for civil servants of up to 4.65%. The government will take in opinions from civil servant representatives and the legislature before a final decision is made. Jacqueline reports.
Last month, the annual pay trend survey released its results, pointing to increases of 2.87% for senior civil servants, 4.65% for middle-ranking workers, and 4.5% for junior staff. The Executive Council generally endorsed the recommendations today. Senior officials would receive the suggested extent for a pay rise, while mid- and lower-ranking staffers are both getting paid 4.65% more, retrospectively effective April 1st this year. Secretary for the Civil Service Ingrid JUN said, apart from the pay trend survey results, the Executive Council deliberated over 5 other major factors, including the economy, the government's financial position, and civil service morale. Last year's survey indicated pay hikes of up to 7.26%. The government eventually settled on 2.5% for all staffers. JUN said that is not relevant for this year's pay considerations.
The factors in the last year, in the previous year, which has been taken into account already, would not be considered again. On the point of inflation, every year the CE in Council takes into consideration the change in cost of living. Last year it has been taken into account. This year, again, the new figures has been taken into account.
Some citizens say the pay rise is attractive enough to retain staff and woo more people to join the government.
Civil servant average salary is higher than the private sector, and of course, any increase may attract more people to join the government.
4.6% is close to the inflation rate. I think it's acceptable.
But some civil servant unions are unhappy with the rise. Lee Kuai-yin, president of the Hong Kong Chinese Civil Servants Association, said she was disappointed with the proposed rises, which are lower than their earlier proposed 5.1%. She said the hikes couldn't catch up with inflation and officials have failed to seize the opportunity to boost civil servants' morale. Echoing the sentiment, the Senior Government Officers Association said officials have ignored the efforts of civil servants in serving the government and the public.
The Civil Service Bureau said they will discuss with the 4 central consultative councils and representatives of service-wide staff unions on Wednesday before passing the proposal to the legislature. Jacqueline, TVB News.
The government is seeking court injunctions to prohibit any form of the broadcasting, performing, publishing and dissemination of the song Glory to Hong Kong. Legal experts said if an injunction order is granted, anyone sharing or playing the song in public will risk prosecution.
Earlier this year, on a number of occasions involving Hong Kong athletes or sporting teams, a song related to the 2019 social unrest was played instead of the Chinese national anthem. Organisers blame online search results. On Monday, the government applied to the court for a legal injunction and an interim injunction to ban the broadcasting, performing, printing, publishing or selling of the song in any way, whether it's the melody or the lyrics or in combination. That's with the intent to advocate the separation of the SAR from China, or with the intent to insult the national anthem, as to suggest that the SAR is an independent state and has a national anthem of her own. Authorities also seek to restrain any attempts to assist, cause, procure, incite, aid and abet others to commit or participate in any of these acts. The application includes 32 video links that contain different versions of the song Glory to Hong Kong, which the government seeks to ban. The Department of Justice noted the court has already ruled that the content of the song may constitute sedition. A government spokesperson stressed the freedom of speech is not absolute, adding the application aims to safeguard national security and is necessary, reasonable, legitimate and consistent with the Bill of Rights. Executive Councillor and Senior Counsel Ronnie Tong explained how likely someone would violate the injunction order if it is granted.
If you say I store it in my handphone and it accidentally went off when I'm riding the MTR, then it becomes an issue as to whether or not it was truly accidental or you deliberately played a song while you're on the MTR. So the risk is there. It is for the individual to try to manage that risk.
He suggests that members of the public delete the song on any advice as well as any previous social media posts related to the song. As for Google, which has been reluctant to remove the wrong search results, Ronnie Tong said the firm's headquarters in Hong Kong will also be subject to the court order.
Acting on a tip-off, the Organised Crime and Triad Bureau of the Police arrested a 34-year-old man on Monday for allegedly inciting others to commit violence. The suspect was arrested in a unit at Shek Lei Estate, Kwai Chung. The man was said to have started in September last year through his Facebook and Twitter accounts. He allegedly said violence can change the world. Sources say he mentioned several notable cases of violence, including the 2014 Taipei metro attack committed by 21-year-old Cheng Chi, but no mention was made of the recent stabbing incidents. Speaking ahead of the Executive Council meeting this morning, Chief Executive JUN Lee said he's deeply concerned about the familicide in Sham Shui Po. He said it's important for those involved to seek appropriate assistance, adding that the authorities will also review relevant policies. Veronica Lin tells us more.
In a tragic incident yesterday, a 29-year-old woman of Indian descent allegedly smothered to death her 3 daughters, aged 2 to 5, with pillows. Her estranged husband, who is of Pakistani descent, went to the Kwai Chung public mortuary with family members this morning to identify the bodies. Ahead of today's Executive Council meeting, Chief Executive JUN Lee spoke on the tragedy with a heavy heart and emphasized that the government is very much concerned about domestic violence cases. He said it's crucial for the parties concerned to seek help.
I appeal to everyone to show more care to your friends and family. We need to protect our children. No matter what happens in a family, violence is not the solution. It will only exacerbate the problem. Same as every human being, every child has a right to live.
As for the occurrence of 2 separate homicides in just 4 days, which begs the question of whether support for those with mental illnesses is insufficient, Lee said a review will be conducted and that public-private cooperation should be encouraged. The Advisory Committee on Mental Health will discuss the issue on Friday. Some committee members believe private-public cooperation needs to be strengthened.
Member
Yun Shuk-yen said waiting times for new patients can be as long as more than a year. However, the patient's condition may worsen during that time, and that a lack of support is very worrying, she said. She said most psychiatric cases are not followed up promptly, and that public hospital doctors are so busy that the time they see each patient is very short. She hopes the committee will come up with solutions to the problem and better redistribute community resources. Chief Executive JUN Lee said, on top of deploying more law enforcement, the government will also take a preventative approach and assist those with mental health issues. Veronica Lin, TVB News.
The Court of Final Appeal yesterday overturned journalist Bao Choi's conviction over a search performed on the government's vehicle registry. The journalist was accused of making false statements regarding the search. Chief Executive JUN Lee said he respects the court's decision and believes the outcome reflects on the fairness of Hong Kong's justice system. Lee said the authorities will review the case in detail and will improve the procedures and guidelines for accessing the vehicle registry. Meanwhile, police detained more than 20 people on the 34th anniversary of the Tiananmen crackdown. Lee said officers were merely performing their duties.
I think the government position is very clear. Anybody must act in accordance with the law. In all public events, then of course the law governing these events include the Public Order Ordinance and also laws that govern activities that may relate to incitement, disorderly conduct, etc., etc.
Overseas, a major Soviet-era dam in the Russian-controlled part of southern Ukraine was breached on Tuesday, unleashing floodwaters across the war zone. Both Ukraine and Russia said this was the result of an intentional attack by the other's forces. Daniel Rao tells us more.
Footage from the scene showed the remains of the Kakhovka Dam as water levels raced up by meters in a matter of hours. The dam is 30 meters tall and 3.2 kilometers long and holds an amount of water equal to the Great Salt Lake in the U.S. state of Utah. It was built in 1956 on the Dnipro River as part of the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant. The dam supplies water to the Crimean Peninsula, which was annexed by Russia in 2014. That's in addition to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, which is also under Russian control and gets cooling water from the reservoir. The International Atomic Energy Agency said there was no immediate nuclear safety risk at the plant due to the dam failure. However, the IAEA added it was monitoring the situation closely. The head of the plant also said there was no current threat to the station. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky blamed Russia for the damage. Zelensky wrote on Telegram the destruction of the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant dam only confirms for the whole world that Russia must be expelled from every corner of Ukrainian land. Ukraine's military said that Russian forces blew up the dam. Ukrainian authorities have previously warned that the dam's failure could unleash 18 million cubic meters of water and flood Kherson and dozens of other areas where hundreds of thousands of people live. President Zelensky has called an emergency meeting to deal with the crisis. Russian-installed officials in Kherson said Ukraine struck the dam several times. They said the alleged attack destroyed the hydraulic valves of the hydroelectric power station, but the dam was not totally destroyed. The Russian-controlled region's administration urged residents of coastal settlements to prepare for evacuation. It was not immediately clear how the floodwaters could affect Ukraine's long-planned counter-offensive against Russian forces who are present across southern and eastern Ukraine. Daniel Rao, TVB News.
Former American Vice President Mike Pence has filed paperwork declaring his intention to run for president in 2024. Pence is set to formally announce the bid in Iowa on Wednesday. The former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie is also expected to enter the race from the crucial primary state of New Hampshire. Matthew Bray reports.
The Republican primary field of candidates is growing. Former Vice President Mike Pence is joining a list that already includes Donald Trump, Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis and Tim Scott. Pence will launch his bid at an event in Des Moines, Iowa tomorrow. He describes himself as a Christian, a conservative and a Republican in that order.
So Pence advisors see Iowa as a state where they feel like he could really do well, in part because Republican voters in the state tend to swing conservative. It's a state with a lot of evangelical Christians. Pence is somebody who identifies as a born-again Christian.
As vice president, Pence had been a loyal defender of Donald Trump after the U.S. Capitol building incident. Pence split from Trump, but still aligns himself with some of the more popular policies of the Trump presidency.
So while Pence has really worked over the last 2.5 years to differentiate himself from Trump when it comes to certain policy positions, you'll also hear him constantly talking up the accomplishments of what he calls the Trump-Pence administration. And every speech he gives, that's always a line in there.
But there is a yawning chasm in the polling. Trump dominates the field among potential GOP primary voters with 49%. DeSantis is next with 19% and Pence has just 5%. Another candidate expected to take part is Chris Christie, the former New Jersey governor who broke with Trump over the results of the 2020 election. Voters on the ground in New Hampshire had mixed views on Christie entering, given he has just 1% support.
I think Chris Christie's getting in this just to attack Trump. I don't think he has any real goals at trying to become president. I think it's more of taking someone he doesn't like down.
I think Christie's great too. I think the more the competition, the better we can see who Donald Trump really is and who these guys are. And DeSantis, love him too. I'm a Florida homeowner. And, bring it.
Christie faces an uphill task to the nomination as the GOP remains closely aligned with Trump. Matthew Bray, TVB News.
Still ahead on tonight's news. The government suggests that part of the Fan Lane golf course be temporarily rezoned as undetermined. And a gigantic catfish caught in Italy. government has suggested to the Town Planning Board to temporarily rezone part of the Fanling Golf Course set for building public homes as undetermined. Some are skeptical of the government's move. Meanwhile, the Hung Yee Cook suggested land from a nearby village could be used for building flats instead.
Earlier, the government decided that 9 hectares of the Fanling Golf Course will be used to build 12,000 public housing units. But on Monday, the Planning Department submitted a paper to the Town Planning Board to temporarily rezone the proposed public housing site to undetermined. It noted following the environmental impact assessment approved last month, development parameters had to be adjusted. Authorities said the temporary rezoning will provide a buffer period to allow relevant departments to follow up on reviewing the appropriate layout and development parameters. If the Town Planning Board completes discussions by November, the Civil Engineering and Development Department will take about a year to complete the review. That means the final report will be submitted for consideration to the Director of Environment Protection by the end of next year. Brian Wong, a member of Labour Research Community, said it's very rare for the government to give in this way. He also doubts if the site will still be used to build public housing units. Lawmaker Lau Chi Pang, who has written a book on the Hong Kong Golf Club, said on TVB's Straight Talk program that nearby land may be available for building flats.
This is a golf course which is recreational use, and then we take this part of land and then change it to residential. This is something that we need to consider very carefully. But now we have this northern metropolis, and then recently I've learned that villages in the new territories, they are more willing to negotiate or to cooperate with the government. A whole village to the north of this Fanling Golf Course.
The city's rural body, Hung Yee Cook, suggested about 14 hectares of vacant farmland nearby could be used for public housing development. An architect said although new roads may be needed to be built for that option, it would prevent having to uproot and replant ancient trees.
The Court of Final Appeal has granted leave for a former associate professor at the Chinese university to appeal against his conviction of double murder. The former academic is serving a life sentence after being found guilty of murdering his wife and daughter in 2015. Ko Kim's son worked at the Chinese University's Department of Anesthesia and Intensive Care. His wife and daughter died of carbon monoxide poisoning inside their car when the toxic gas leaked from a yoga ball. Judges at the Court of Final Appeal said the prosecution had handled the evidence, including the yoga ball, with substantial and grave injustice. The judges also said the trial judge in the lower court had misdirected the jury in reaching a verdict. Some health experts predict that herpes zoster infections, more commonly known as shingles, will grow sharply in the city as the population ages. They suggested the government launch vaccination subsidy schemes in stages. A local study found that owing to a lack of vaccinations, 2 in every 7 Hong Kongers contract shingles. Among them, 1 in 20 has neuropathic pain. It also found that widespread vaccination can effectively reduce the number of cases and the accompanying symptoms. Pharmacist William Cho said the government should introduce a vaccination subsidy scheme in stages. They should prioritize vulnerable groups such as those above 65 and then expand it to seniors aged 50 or above and other high-risk groups. Eventually, the scheme should cover other age groups to alleviate the burden of medical costs. A giant catfish has been caught in Italy's longest river, the Po, by an angler. Alessandro Biancardi caught the catfish after 40 minutes of struggling solo to haul the monster in. The fish, measuring 2 meters 85 centimeters, is an unusual visitor for the river. Biancardi claimed it was Guinness World Record, but that has yet to be verified. After photos and measurements were taken, the catfish was released back into the river. That's the news. Thanks for watching.